What up? What up?
Hey,
What
how's
up?
it going, Marlon? How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Good, good. Hey, Michelle. Hello, hello. Hey, Randy. How's it going?
Good, good.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Bethany, good to see you as well. Hey, Bethany, can you hear me?
Yes.
Nice, nice. Good to see you as well. Awesome, awesome. Well, I am super happy to be able to chat with all of you today about children's books. I really do believe children's books are the first frontier for exposure, for reflection. It is, where kids will be able to gain their confidence, gain their sense of self. One of the places they can gain their confidence and their sense of self. And just so honored to be talking with you all who have made such meaningful contributions to the space. Thank you to Afro Comic Con for putting on this panel and bringing us here together to have this dialogue. The very first thing that I want to start off with, and this is going to be a question for everyone, is tell us your name, where you're from, and your favorite children's books, or one of your favorite children's books growing up. So, Marlon, you're first on my screen, buddy, so you're going to be up first. Your name, where you're from, favorite children's book.
Hello. How's it going? My name is Marlon McKinney. I'm an author and an illustrator. I've recently put out my fourth children's book out of my own publishing company that does kids' books that specializes in African historical fiction. It's called Makita, the Queen of Sheba. And my favorite book is probably, as a kid, is Where the Wild Things Are. That imagination was just one of my favorite books.
Nice, nice. Michelle, what about you? A little intro to yourself,
Yeah.
where you're from, and your favorite children's book.
So I grew up in Washington, D.C., and now I live near Bethany Beach, Delaware. I write picture books, and my favorite book growing up was Charlotte's Web.
Nice. A classic, a classic. Okay, Bethany, what about you? Same question.
I am Bethany Seymour. I am the author of adult and young adult work. I'm the author of the A Song Below Water duology, which included A Chorus Rises, which came out this past June. My most recent release is So Many Beginnings, which is a Little Women remix in the Remixed Classics line from Fievel and Friends. And I grew up in Northern California and have since expatriated a couple of times and now live on the East Coast. And my favorite children's book, that would be really difficult. The books that I have very strong memories of would be Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, and this, what was it? Summer of the Monkeys. It was like in the same vein as Where the Red Fern Grows. It's about a little boy who wanted some coon hounds, worked a long time to get some coon hounds. Bad things tend to happen to these hounds. And then that's my whole memory of it. But there were circus monkeys in this one, so that was why I really liked Summer of the Monkeys.
Nice, nice. Those are two really good selections, two great selections. And Randy Pink, what about you?
Hey, I'm Randy Pink. I am from Birmingham, Alabama. My mama's from Birmingham, Alabama. Her mama is from Birmingham, Alabama. So I'm rooted. As far as I was a very odd child. So I always had a pen in my hand, and I rarely read. I always only wrote. If I had to choose, I'd choose The Given Tree, which actually says a lot about me as a human, that I would like such a sad, self-loathing book. But yeah, I was a writer. I was writing as a child.
Nice, nice. That actually leads me into the first question that I have for you, Randy, which is about what age, since you were always writing, since you just said that, at what age did you compose your first work? Or did you know that I don't just like writing, I want to actually do writing as much as I can throughout my life? When was that spark?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think I grew up in a loud house, very animated. Lord have mercy. So, and I was the kid in the corner, like the youngest, like, please stop yelling. Oh my God, please. And I just picked up a pen and I started writing. How I put it, I couldn't get words from heart to mouth. They wouldn't come out like the rest of my family. So I just wrote. I would write on the sermon notes at the church and throw them away after. Like I write like a doodler doodles. Um, and as far as when I got the confidence to believe that I was capable of writing something that anyone would care to read, I was in my 30s when that happened.
Yeah, that journey of courage. I mean, you mentioned something so important. That journey of courage is such an important part of all of our journeys in terms of at what point do you take something that's internal, inside, that you've been cultivating, and you feel ready to share it with the world, for both the positive aspects of things, and then also you open yourself up to feedback, right? Which is something that, me and my mom talk about all the time. My mom is New York Times bestselling author Mary Honeybee Morrison. She started writing when I was 11. She quit her government job, and she started writing adult fiction. And one of the things we always talk about is, the greatest story ever told probably won't be written, because to get across that threshold, it's just, it really does require. And so, I think that is fascinating. Marlon, I want to talk to you. We're going to bounce around a little bit because I really want to get a few different things in, and I want it to flow in kind of an asymmetrical way on purpose. Marlon, I want to talk to you a little bit about process. I know you have a very, very unique process for creating children's books, and I want to know why you choose to tell those stories, African and African-American fiction and historical fiction as well, and fantasy. Why do you choose to tell those stories through that illustrative vehicle? Oh, Marlon, you're on mute, buddy.
No, I was just saying, Jesse, that's a great question. I mean, I'll just say this. So I have a background in marketing and advertising. I worked in the industry for many years. I worked for a lot of big companies where I learned to animate, and I learned a lot about technology and digital technology. And my thought is the kids that are growing up nowadays, we want them to have the same type of quality of African-American content, just like all of the other quote unquote American, if you think of some things like Marvel Universe, or you think of like movies like Pixar, and kids play all these video games, the Xboxes and the PlayStations. So kids are already adept in technology. I mean, they have cell phones, they have all of this different content. And I just wanted to bring that technology to the, I guess, historical fiction of Africa, just so that kids can see it. A lot of times when children are in class, they don't get taught African history. And then when they do, they start to read those words. I just want to give them pictures and images that they can relate to when you say Black King and Black Queen and Black Princess and African excellence, just visuals to bring them to that state so that they can excel and really try to push the boundaries of who they are as kids and individuals. Hope that answered your question.
No, it absolutely did. And I am curious, what connected you so strongly to the culture of African and African-American narratives? Why did you want to become a vessel, for lack of a better term, to connect to young readers with these types of experiences?
I mean, it actually, when I grew up, I mean, we all know, usually when you grow up in the American school system, you don't really get taught African history. Basically, you get taught you were a slave, they brought us here from Africa, and then that's it. We're supposed to make our own way, and anything that has happened to African Americans is because of our own fault. That's kind of like this narrative that keeps kind of portraying out. So when I went to college, it was the first time I actually learned African history and Black history at Long Beach State with Malona Karenga, and like teaching me, African history and just everything that wasn't taught in schools. And as you go on in life and you make money and you have family and you know what I mean, you live your life, all of those teachings always stuck with me, but I needed a vessel to get those out to the world. And that's when I started my publishing company, Conscious Culture Publishing, to take those stories and all that imagery that was in my head as a kid and to bring it out so that kids can see it for the future.
That is fascinating, especially when you mentioned college is sort of a departure point for you, where you really just dove in because you got to see history from a different side. I too feel the same. I took an art class in a couple of art classes in college at UC Santa Barbara, and I don't know if I hadn't taken those classes, would I be in picture book publishing specifically? That's really when I fell in love with imagery as a vehicle to communicate story, and I learned a lot about imagery, about line work, and all that other stuff. So that was really, really fun. Thank you, Marlon. That was awesome. Michelle, I have a ton of questions for all of you. I'm going to try to bottle this up so we can do this in a reasonable amount of time because you're all so fascinating. Michelle, 10 picture books authored. That is phenomenal. Congratulations on that. I did notice that, your last two seem to have a strong dance theme throughout them. And I'm wondering if is dance a big part of your life outside of being an author? Why do you feel like you want to tell, especially these nonfiction stories of really these dance heroes? Why are you drawn to authoring those books?
Yeah, and I was going to say, the 8 picture books that I wrote before that was a lot of young animal type of books, probably stemming from raising a son. Okay, now my son is all grown up. And so somewhere around 2015, I started really looking at what I wanted to write, what really interested me, whereas some of my other stories came from kind of antics of my son and experiences that I had with him. So I had actually just moved from DC to the Delaware Beach area in 2015, and I signed up for a ballet class, which is something that, I took ballet as a little girl at the Jones Haywood Ballet School in DC. And so I really signed up as a grown-up just to make some friends. I was in a new area and I always loved to dance. So it was in that class that I got the idea of writing a book about Black ballet dancers. And I knew that I wanted to write about someone in history. So I started kind of tracing back who was the first Black prima ballerina, and it went back to Janet Collins. And I actually hadn't heard of Janet Collins. So she was the first Black prima ballerina with the Metropolitan Opera House in 51. And so that intrigued me because I had all my life followed dance and followed ballet, but yet hadn't heard of this particular person. And so I thought that would make a really cool book. If I can get something written on that book and expose kids to this person that I hadn't heard of, that really was my goal. So I've always been interested in dance. And then after I wrote that book, and Ebony Glenn was the illustrator for that, and she did a phenomenal job. She also did the illustrations for the Simone Biles book. But after I wrote Brave Ballerina, and then I was thinking about what I was going to write next. Well, in 2016, there was the Olympics. And so I started really paying attention to Simone Biles and noticed that there wasn't a picture book about her. There was she had a memoir, a book for older readers. And I really wanted to create something for the young, ages 4 to 8, that age range. And so I did kind of continue with this theme of movement. And my books are rhyming. The ones that I've done so far are rhyming. And I think it really is kind of in sync with that idea of movement. So it really went well with dance and gymnastics.
No, I love that. I love that it has such a close tie to you and also your development too throughout the process. I am curious about, from the point where you knew you wanted to write about Simone Biles specifically,
Yeah.
what was your process? And the reason I'm going to ask this question is because I know Afro Comic Con has a vibrant community of not only consumers, but creators, people who are making things. So you have an idea, you have a spark, you see the Olympics, you come up with a story in verse. What's your process for then either pitching that? Do you hand it off to your agent? What do you do after you've composed a draft that you're happy with of a children's picture book?
Yeah, so I am represented by a literary agent named Rosemary Stamola, who I've been with since 2005. So we've been together for many years, and I just adore her. I think we're just such a great fit. And she really is the first stop for me. When I create something, or if I want to run an idea by someone, she's the person that I go to. And so in this case, now I had done Brave Ballerina. And so I went through this process of thinking about what I would do next. And so we went to the editor of Brave Ballerina. So that was Jessica Anderson, who was at Macmillan at the time. And so because it was similar, the rhyme scheme was a bit different, but it was still rhyming. So because it was similar, and I immediately thought, hoped that Ebony Glynn would be able to illustrate this too. That's really what drove us to pick that editor, you know? Yeah. So it kind of worked out naturally. But normally with my writing process in general, I start with Rosemary. You know, I'll come up with something, I'll go to my agent, I'll say, here's what I'm thinking. And then she usually has great advice about how to make something better, how to get it in shape so that we can present it to an editor. I know with Brave Ballerina, like my first draft of that one, Rosemary felt like she wanted it to sound even more like ballet. And so I got more in tune with kind of the movement and the sounds and things that go along with ballet. So she'll give me great advice like that, which I really appreciate. And then once meaning me and Rosemary, kind of get it in shape and I make any changes, to any suggestions that she has, then she'll help identify, okay, who are we going to submit this to? So she'll help weigh in on that.
Those are awesome insights. And yes, an agent, for those who are agented or would like to be, can often be excellent sounding boards for initial stories, because they're the ones who are talking to the editors and they know what it is they want and what's working and what's selling and what's not, because they're the ones doing the selling, right? And so that is excellent insights. Thank you so much for just kind of laying out the pathway of how you took an idea and took a script and then where you went with it next and why. That was really fantastic, Michelle. Thank you. Bethany. Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's talk for a little bit about A Song Below Water. So I am super curious and super interested in why you decided to set this story through, of course, a Black lens, but the lens of a siren from mythology. Why that mergence? That is a very particular combination, and it lends itself to so much. And then when you drop it in Portland, it's just like, you know, you have a whole nother thing. I want to know all about the process of why those vehicles felt right for this story.
Well, I always say that for people who are interested in becoming authors, and sometimes for consumers, that is the way that the question is framed. And it's an assumption that there is always this intentionality. Like I sit down and write a list of like, okay, I want it to be Black and I want it to have sirens. And that's, you know, for me, I always say, like, I don't have to, as a Black woman author, I get a lot of credit for the double bind and like, oh, how do you balance it? I am that balance. I am that. So I don't have to try to put something through the Black lens, because that's my lens. It's literally me, and I don't need like a reason to tap into it, except that the white editor in the, you know, sort of in the ether tells you that you need a justification for that. You don't actually need a justification for it. It's just life. It's just reality. So with this, I was literally, and people have probably heard this story so many times with A Song Below Water, but I am always on Twitter with my sister. And so we were in DM, and we were actually watching a Black woman on Twitter get dogpiled, which unfortunately is not uncommon, but this was a particularly vitriolic attack. This person would go on to be doxxed and then would leave social media. And it was all because she had, of course, an opinion, and she expressed it. And I don't know if you guys know, but that is not allowed on the internet. So I was talking to my sister, Jennifer, in DM, and I said, my voice is power, because part of the dog pile was what it always is with misogynoir. Nobody cares about you. Nobody needs to know what you think. Nobody loves you. You can die, blah, blah, all the things that just automatically get said to Black women. Just the starting point of disagreeing with a Black woman is just like vitriolic abuse. So constantly gaslighting and trying to convince you that you have no power, you have no purpose, you have no impact, when obviously the observable world tells you totally opposite. And so I said, my voice is power, because this is not a question of whether I am powerful. It's not a question of whether I'm impactful. If I weren't impactful, you wouldn't be here. Like, why would you be doing this onslaught? Why would you be going to Reddit and the New Republic or whatever all of those awful places on the internet are, and bringing people back to Twitter to attack this woman? You're doing that because of the audacity of her expressing something, this particular person who cannot be eradicated, who cannot be silenced, who cannot be removed, All of your best efforts have not resulted in undoing Black women. And that creates a very specific kind of anger and hate. And when I said my voice is power, it was like, oh, that sounds like a siren. And these are immediate, these things happen immediately. These aren't like, oh, I have to sit with this for a day and then it becomes something else. It's immediately Black women are sirens and only Black women are sirens. That's just an immediate fact now. And so, I mean, because once you see that, it's like nobody else is a siren. It's just Black women. And so I'm writing a young adult. I knew it was going to be young adult. I always know the difference between adult and young adult projects because if there is an intentionality of what I want to say and who I want to edify, I know that's a young adult audience. The gentleness with which I approach the audience, not the subject, but the audience, is how I know when I'm doing something for the young adult audience and when I'm doing adult market. And so I knew immediately that in this world, power is not the problem. The problem is who has this particular type of power. And so I knew that there were going to be other types of magical creatures who were going to be beloved. And it was just specifically being a siren that was not acceptable. I also immediately decided it was going to be set in not Santa Barbara. I'm sorry, you said UC Santa Barbara, and this sister went to UC Santa Barbara. But she has lived for like a decade and a half in Portland. So I've spent a lot of time with her in Portland, and Portland has a really specific personality. It is one of those cities that has it just has a very strict like characterization, and it is not really factual like a lot of cities' narratives, particularly to be in what was originally a whites only state, intended on the West Coast, as west as you can get, and the North, and to have been considered a whites only state and to have had legislation about when Black and Asian and Indigenous people had to be outside of the state lines on threat of death. Even if they were brought by and enslaved, they had to be out because Oregon was going to be a whites only state. And, Portland being this really, I mean, they had segregationist laws, the likes of which most of the West Coast has never seen or heard tell of, but they did have it in Oregon, of course, and they did have it in Portland. And then suddenly, at some point, having done nothing, no interrogation, no eradication, no process, nothing, no justice, no equity, suddenly we're just going to flip a switch, and our identity is going to be, we are the most progressive place on earth. And I'm just going to call BS because you can't do that. That's not how that works. And we know that because while I was writing the book, or maybe a little bit before, there was that whole federal standoff with that white supremacist prepper group that like took over a federal like wildlife area and just decided they owned it now. And that happened in the state of Oregon. And of course, I don't have to say this anymore because we all saw what happened to Oregon in 2020 and in Portland specifically in 2020. But when I was writing it, I was like, this is going to be really hard for people. The mythology in America persists. It's so prevalent. You could tell somebody something that's directly in front of them and it does not matter because mythology is our oxygen in this country. And I was like, this is going to be really interesting to see how people respond to the fact that this is very intentionally a story set in Portland. Portland is one of those places that you go as a Black person and you are confronted by strangers, strange white people you've never met, who will say things like, don't you love being here? Isn't it great? Isn't it great here? And I'm like, you're informing me that it's great here. You're not asking me if it's great here. That's kind of telling, all on its own. So it was very intentionally set in Portland, specifically Portland, Oregon. And they kind of did the rest of the work for me that following year. Showing the reality of Portland to the rest of the United States. But yeah, so none of these things for me, usually I'm going to sit down ahead of time. These are processes and things that are constantly happening in my mind, and a lot of things spark instantaneously, and I will kind of know a bubble of information or a bubble of a story or a character just instantaneously. But I don't ever think like, oh, this needs to be a Black lens, because the alternative would be that I'm starting with a different lens for some reason and having to come to a Black lens, and that's not what's happening.
Yeah, 100%. And thank you so much for shedding some light on the whole totality of that, because that was really one of my biggest sort of curiosities about it. Because in mythology you can pick anything. You can be a black ogre, you can be a black witch, it can be a lot of things. So I wanted to know why Siren, and you really helped me unpack that in terms of voice, symbolism, power, black women, the only mythological creature ostracized in this world. That is just genius. And I love how it's just sort of instantaneous combustion for you. It's just one of those things where it's not so much premeditated and methodical. It's just like when it happens, you know it. And I also think that knowing is really, really important. That inner compass of like when you see it, when you feel it, you know that that's what's going to work for this world that you're creating inside of this fiction. So that is awesome. I mean, I have a ton of more questions about that, because I'm just such a fan of how you explored that, even from a research standpoint, right? All of us have to kind of compile some sort of information when we're creating something. And what bits of information do we want to look at, and how does that influence the stories that we are going to tell? Randy, my next exploration is for you specifically. I know you mentioned you are 3 generations deep of Alabama natives, which I have a ton of questions about that too, and your experience and stuff like that, and we can get to it. But I do want to know what inspired you to write a love story leading up to and centered around the Tulsa Race Massacre.
Okay. Well, first, can I just say to Bethany, so the 20, like mentioned in 2020, it fascinates me, like books that came out in 2020, books that were written in 2020, creatives developing stories in that year. There's a study to be done, because it really was. I have a saying, it came to me in the middle of the night. 2020 unzipped the sheep's clothing from the wolves. We saw, and I don't know what it was about that year, but it was like zoop, and oh, monkey, I thought you were sheep. Nope, you're a wolf. So that, thank you for sharing that. As far as my question, why did I, with Angel of Greenwood, written in 2020, finished, edited, copywritten in the hell of my life. I think I had just given birth to my second. He was, I remember, and I've told this before, I wrote a few sentences of my book with my big toe, because I had a baby nursing at my chest. I had a toddler sleep on my lap, and I had to get it down. And I was writing with my toe. I remember just slowly closing the laptop with the pad of my foot after that. It was hell. But Angel of Greenwood is more than the massacre. Greenwood is more than the massacre. And the reason I wrote the book was I was actually on the circuit for my second book. I was talking Girls Like Us. I was talking with the librarian, and she was like, "What are you working on?" I wasn't working on nothing. I had a little journal entry trying to create the perfect place for my Black babies to live. No plan of publication. It was really just a journal entry. Like, my children will walk to the Black-owned ice cream shop, and it will be awesome. And they don't have to worry about walking, debating, exchanging ideas, and being judged or shot, God forbid. I told that librarian that. I'm just writing in a journal. And she was like, "That sounds like Greenwood." And I said, "What is Greenwood?" I had no idea. This was about 3 years ago now. And I can still kind of feel the shame, like the visceral shame, when she started explaining it to me. I was like, how the hell do I not know about this event, this horrific mass? How do I not know? So I went down the research rabbit hole and discovered, the massacre, June 1st, 1921, the cover up, June 2nd, 1921. So that shame turned to anger, and that journal entry became the foundation of Angel of Greenwood. because I didn't want an entire 300 pages of a massacre. Because if you think about a people, us, rising from hundreds of years of enslavement, post-Reconstruction, deserving of rest, right? But instead saying, I'm picking up bricks and I'm building my paradise here. That deserves, to be lived in. There was love there, just like with Angel and Isaiah. There were mothers there, just like me. There were infants there. There were human beings there who lost their lives, lost their homes. And I needed to see that in Angel of Greenwood for 3/4 of the book. And it manifested itself in, the most powerful thing, love.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely adore that that's where you decided to put the focus, in the context of the larger story. I think that was just so powerful and so moving to tap into the human connection, in addition to the event that's happening around, the race massacre that's happening around. I think that's super powerful. From there, I am curious about what was the fluidity like in terms of selling this story? Was it like instantly, like, because of the times and because, as we know, as Black creatives, a lot of us have never been more in high demand. I have never been busier than I've ever been in my life in the last 18 months as a professional. So for you got this story, you want to tell it through this lens. How, through this experience and through these characters, how was that an easy process for you and your agency to sort of get that sold, or did it take a while? Did they want you to change things that you weren't really comfortable with changing inside the story? What was that like?
Another good question. I think when I first wrote just the pitch, this was it was years ago, and it's hard to think now, but a lot of people didn't know what Greenwood was 3-4 years ago. I tell you what, the catalyst was that HBO Watchmen, that first episode, and I remember going on Twitter the next morning and saying, everybody, I was just starting to research it at that point, and I was like, wow, everybody knows now. So when I pitched it, that episode had not premiered yet, and as a pitch, my wonderful agent Marietta and I reached out to my editor, and we reached out with articles and what it is, a few NPR pieces, and put that all in the pitch. So look, this is what happened. This is what we want to do with it. Kids need to know about this. I didn't, and my kids will, know. If I have to put my own book in their hands, they will know. So it wasn't hard to pitch. I think a lot of people think of a pitch as like a paragraph, but for me, I have a good relationship with my wonderful editor, and I can send clips in that pitch and articles and research and say, I'm trying to do this, come alongside, and she did.
That is awesome. I mean, that tag team between, creator and agent can be so special if, that route is the route that you feel is best for your work, which is something we're going to talk about a little bit later. Especially if I want to talk to you about that too, Marlon, with what inspired you to start your own sort of company and feel like that was the best house for what you were creating. But before we get into that, there is a question that I am extremely curious about that everybody, I really want to hear from everybody on this. What other careers did you do before writing, or what jobs do you do currently with writing? I think sometimes there's this sort of mythos that writers just, yes, you can be a born writer, but there's still this aspect of earning a living that goes along with just being a human in a society. And so, there are sometimes these really interesting career paths that intertwine at points with writing and storytelling. And sometimes they really have nothing to do with that. It's just a means of, my mom used to always say, I work my 9 to 5 for the government and I work my 5 to 9 for writing. And I'm curious about that journey or continued journey for all of you. So outside of writing, I want to hear about some of your career path up to writing, and maybe even things you're still doing now in addition to your amazing writing careers. So, Michelle, we'll let you kick that one off.
Okay, sure. So now I actually all my life have been a writer.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I knew by the time I was in high school that I leaned toward writing and kind of creative pursuits. So when I went to Syracuse University and I majored in journalism and literature. And so I was a reporter for many years. I had different jobs, including different freelance jobs. So there was a time in my life when I was writing for different magazines like Essence, and I kind of carved out a specialty of writing about healthcare. So I do have a day job where I'm a writer editor for a government agency. And so that's my day job. And then I do the books is like my nights and weekends are filled with books. So, and I like it. I mean, honestly, I learned so much in my day job that I like having it. It's given me ideas for books. It's giving me ideas for just general knowledge, increasing my knowledge about the way the world works and things like that. And then, of course, having a regular paycheck is nice. So, yeah.
No, I totally get that. And I'm so glad you said that, Michelle, because I didn't know what, I'm 34 now. I did not know what a copywriter was until I was maybe 26. And I know that's not what you're talking about, but I didn't know what a copywriter was until I was maybe 26. So I didn't know that you can get paid to write for corporations. And so, and once I found that out, I was like, oh, that's totally what I would have been, getting my 10,000 hours in, because what's better than being paid to improve your craft? I mean, even if that's not the realm of writing you're doing, maybe it's something totally different. Maybe you want to do fiction, and over here you're doing like ad copy, but you're still working the earth with grammar, with delivery, with being precise, with being, all of that stuff. And it's like, you can also get a consistent check doing that. It's like they're paying you to improve.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, I think that's true.
And I'm so glad that you've shown like that sort of career path, because you seem to get into it early and really just followed it through all the way. That's really cool. Okay, Marlon, same question.
Yeah. So Jess, I mean, you probably know, so I've been drawn since I was a kid. So, I mean, after I graduated from college, I'm Mr. Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects. I've worked for a lot of different agencies. I work at a Fortune 500 company right now where I'm a creative director, and I do a lot of advertising as well. So the great thing about kind of what you guys were just mentioning is taking the things that you can learn in your day job and applying it to your author business is huge, especially when we start talking about, analytics and, cost per clicks, and you're trying to, do advertising for your book. Definitely any background in terms of marketing and advertising and kind of putting the word out will definitely help your product in the end. So yeah, Mr. Advertising over here.
Nice. And I can tell you from experience, Marlon puts together some of the snappiest visual ads, and he can whip it together so fast. I mean, and think about how much that enhances his ability to amplify things for his own brand, like book posts and things like that. Events, which he has one tomorrow, which he'll tell you about a little later, or Saturday, which he'll tell you about a little bit later. But that is super cool. So ads and creative directing. Awesome. Bethany, what about you?
So I have always been a writer, literally since I was like 7 years old, and a journaler. And I always was like, that's what I'm going to do. Obviously, as a child, you don't know that that's an industry or that you have to like do something to make that happen. I always had the good fortune of having at least a teacher at every school that I went to who was very immediately like, oh, you're a writer. To the point that I had a teacher in middle school who started a writing club specifically to teach me about query letters and how to address, how to look up different agents and everything. And of course, all of that stuff I love her to death. Her name was Elizabeth Stanley. I talk about her all the time. But everything that she told me was almost like immediately obsolete because of the internet. But the point was, it was a professional writer, because she'd written episodes of Star Trek, which my family watched religiously. And so it was a professional writer saying, this is an industry and there is a way, and even if the ways change, that knowledge immediately like changes your entire life. But I also have really strong interests in other things. My degree is in sociology. I started grad school in clinical psychological research. I intentionally never took creative writing classes. I've always had a very strong personal conviction. And I was like, so you're going to teach me how to write like you? So I'm not interested. And like you believe that there's a right way to write. And when I look at everything that's primarily published, it's all for you and about you. So you don't really have a lot to teach me. And that doesn't mean I don't have a lot to learn. It just means that formal education I was not interested in. I was not interested in critique from people who have no idea what I'm doing. So I was always a social scientist. I was literally going to become a forensic psychologist. But I was living over in Great Britain in 2005, and there was a Harper's Bazaar one act competition, and the theme was Paris Noir, and it was to write a one act screenplay on that. And when I was writing it, I was like, okay, I think I've been just acting as though publishing was going to come to me while I go do all these other things that I love to do. And that is not actually the case. So I have to stop everything else that I'm doing. And I never really committed. I was in my early 20s at the time, so I never committed to another career. So I have done other jobs, but they very much were aware that I was one foot out the door. So I was even a social worker for the briefest of blinks. I wrote for a special interest newspaper in my hometown of Sacramento, California. I was a director's assistant for a fine arts company in Carmel, California. I always, if I wanted to do something, I could always find something that was used my talents and paid well. But I was like, this is not my career. I'm not trying to do this. And I am a full-time writer. I do not have a day job. This is the life that I intended. So I only do my writing work. And as any of us published authors know, that means that I have 3 full-time jobs. At any given time, just with events, with publicity, with, interviews, with writing, with research, with reading other people, with being a CP, because of course, many of us are critique partners for other writers, just like they're critique partners for us. So I don't have time for a full-time job outside of writing, and I don't have any intention of getting one. So.
That is awesome. What would you say was your fondest of those jobs that you sort of laid out, that you hopscotched through, but you knew you weren't going to be staying here for long? What do you have the fondest memories of? Which one?
I mean, I always, this is going to sound terrible. My fondest memory is of people understanding that I'm very good at something and treating me appropriately. I don't have a lot of great experience, being a social worker, there's not a lot of great experiences that have to do with that, because you get close enough and you really are like, oh, this can't be reformed. And I firmly believe that this can't be reformed. This is just another campaign of violence. And then one of the things that was really interesting is working for that fine arts company. It was like working with a lot of people who had a lot of money, and they were like me in 7th grade before I knew that this is an industry. But the problem is they had a lot of money to throw at it. So instead of learning how to properly do what they were trying to do, it was just like, well, my friends will bankroll this. And they did. But so I would be like, hey, so this actually, you're wasting a lot of money here, and I shouldn't be the third in command of a company that I just joined. But the way that you have this set up, I am literally like the third person in charge of this company. So that was really interesting, because it was like, oh, this is what it looks like if you don't learn that this is an intersection of art and business. You have to learn the business part of this. You cannot skate on art. Even if you have a lot of wealthy friends, you will still lose a ton of money that you didn't have to lose. So that was really interesting. I'm a people observer. I'm a sociologist by instruction. So I'm always very, very interested in watching people and the way that their self-image is out of sync with reality, and how far that is and how long that can persist without them making any changes.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. That was great. Thank you so much for that. Randy, same question. Careers outside of, let's say, creative writing, to be specific, that you've had in the past or that you hold currently as well.
Oh, well, all that one loss. I have done a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And you name it, I did it. And I think the most interesting of it was recently. Prior to March of 2021, I was a stay-at-home mom writer. So, it didn't really matter. I had a breadwinner. And after, when I realized I was not going to have that, I started applying for jobs. And I realized that I was, I have a master's degree, but I was only getting considered for administrative positions. And I did not want to go back to the front desk. So I had some advances that I'd saved up, and I purchased some land in Birmingham City Center. And I'm opening a nonprofit treehouse village now, which sounds odd, but is actually freaking cool. And it actually just went viral on TikTok. So I have a lot of support, and it's actually gonna happen. It consists of 4 tree houses. There's a literary tree house because it's me. There's an elders farm tree house where elders and teens the elders will share their brilliance with the teens and how to grow and cook and share food. And there's a maps treehouse with the redlining maps of Birmingham, the cave dwelling map. I mean, it's a project that's taken off, and now I can actually sit at the conference table without, being hushed up. Now people are asking me what my ideas are. So coolest thing I ever did was to jump off the cliff, spend my advances, move in with my mama, and start my own damn job.
I love
It's
that.
okay to say damn.
No, yeah, we're good. I love that. I absolutely love that. Writing in so many ways, for lack of a better phrase, is just betting on what you believe is going to be worthwhile for other people, right? This story, this book, the series, in a sense, that's kind of what we're all trying to do and what we're all doing to a degree. So I just love also that you mentioned that you have a varied career path leading up to it. I too have done a bunch of other things, worked in tech, worked in finance, just a bunch of stuff into the writing path. Now, one question that I did have for everyone here, because I do feel like it's, for lack of a better term, I do think it's meaningful to explore it. When was the first time you saw yourself reflected in literature, and what was that experience like? Was it empowering? Was it confusing? Was it frustrating? I want to know, when was the first time you remember seeing yourself reflected in literature and what that experience was like? We'll start with you again, Michelle.
Okay, let me think. Probably Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry.
Mhm.
Because what I remember about that book is carrying it around a lot, and just seeing another brown girl. So for me, that was impactful. Yeah. I had that recognition and that raised my interest in that book because I wanted to see what is this all about? Yeah.
A beautiful book, absolutely beautiful, beautiful book, and I couldn't agree more. Okay, Bethany, what about you?
I'm glad I'm going directly after Michelle because I think it's so important to show that we are not a monolith and that different Black children have different desires and needs that a tiny fraction of representation cannot sustain and cannot fulfill. Because like I said, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry was one of my favorite books for exactly the reason Michelle said. You see a Black girl, you know it's about a Black girl, and that draws you to it. And I adored that, but I didn't feel seen or reflected in it. I saw that it was about people who look like me. And at the time, especially growing up in the 80s and the early 90s, that still was a very big deal. That was still a really big deal. Like, I didn't read Babysitter's Club unless the story was about the Black girl. I didn't read, so I was always, I never settled. I was never like, okay, well, I give up. I'll just settle for these things. I never settled, but because of that, I didn't ever feel like I saw myself actually. Until I wrote my own books, because I am a Black girl from the West Coast, present day. And for me, if I went into a school library and I was looking for people who look like me, I've got to go back into the past and I've got to go down to the South. And the implication of that is I don't exist. My family doesn't exist. My people don't exist. There's no such thing as Black girls on the West Coast. And that's why it was so wonderful to write about a Black girl, particularly in an IB program as Tavia is, particularly in primarily white private school settings and things, because you either don't see them or you see them as being plucked out and put in a white narrative, and you just see the fraction of them that you see when they're around their white peers. It was really important to me to, at 36 years old, at the time, I think when it came out, or 37, to be able to say, like, okay, here is a book for all of the Black kids who are actually from the West Coast, who don't have huge ties to the South or even to the East Coast, who don't want to have to look back in time to see themselves. You exist today. You had a very particular culture, and you've gone through things, a very sort of clandestine sort of racism, American racism, that a lot of times people pretend does not exist. And that kind of gaslighting is also really, really harmful. So I still had to write the book that I saw myself in.
And I love that too, that you see yourself, like, I mean, that's kind of where we're participants in the space. And you're so right. Like, a spectrum of experience is super, super important. And hopefully helping more kids have more of a library and a catalog, kids, teens, young adults, have more of a library and a catalog to see at least parts of themselves reflected. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one, like every part of your character is embodied in this one character. But I do think we need more of that, which is why I'm so glad to be talking to all of you. Marlon, okay, when was the first time you saw yourself reflected in literature, and what was that experience like? Oh, you're on mute, buddy. Oh, Marlon, you're on mute, buddy. I feel like you're saying some gold too.
Again, exactly. Again, no, I was just saying this. I'm kind of with Bethany on this, just for me, because honestly, I'll just say this. My parents are from Louisiana. I grew up in California. There's been times I've been in private school where I'm the only Black kid there. Also in college and many jobs I've had throughout my life, right? I'm an artist. I was never great at sports very much, I wasn't exactly a nerd, but I wasn't exactly a thug, you know what I mean? So it's kind of this middle area, and plus I'm in a multicultural city, with San Francisco. So I mean, honestly, I have yet to get that book. But with that being said, because even writing and music, it's all kind of interrelated. I'd probably say in that point, probably music is the way that I've got some content that feels like it's part of me. That's something that's touched me. And it's the same, it's still writing, every person that's making music out there is writing as well. But I think that's probably just music was more than something that felt like it was touching me rather than something that I actually read.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating too, just the needing to reach into other mediums to feel resonant reflection, to really feel like I'm a part of this, and it gets me, at least to some degree. Yeah, that's powerful. That's really powerful. And Randy, what about you? When was the first time you saw yourself reflected in literature, and how did it feel?
Same. That book does not exist.
Yeah.
I float somewhere between Toni Morrison and My So-Called Life. And I don't know how that happened. I've tried to make that happen. And, you know, that's one of the terrifying things about being a Black woman writer, because there's no framework. I mean, many of my mistakes have been made with a microphone in my hand at this point. I've been writing and releasing books for a minute, and I done made errors because I don't have anything to look to. I'm trying to create that thing that I know I can do in literature, that Toni Morrison, My So-Called Life mixture. And I've made so many mistakes on the way, but I'm gonna keep on until I write that book.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Participatory, so important. Okay, so we have a little less than 4 minutes left. What I would love to do is just for each of you to let people know where they can follow your work, and how they can just be a bigger and bigger part of your fan base. So let's go with Randy. Go ahead. You go first.
Oh man. Well, I dismissed myself from Twitter, so don't look for me there. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Instagram.
Where can they find you on Instagram? What's your handle?
Lord have mercy.
Okay.
Randy_Pink. And I'm doing my best.
That's all we can do. That's all we can do. All right, Michelle, where can people follow your work and become bigger fans of your work?
Yes. So for me, michellemeadows.com. That links to everywhere. So that would link to Twitter and Facebook and, and I just want to mention real quick, since we're talking about representation, something I just posted on my website is I recently sold a book to Random House called How to Love a Pony, which is about a little Black girl with a pony who lives on a horse farm. And I had really looked and checked out a lot of books about little girls and ponies and could not find a little Black girl. So I was like, I'm about to fix that. So that's one of the reasons that I really love, what we do, what we all do. And, just making sure that people know representation matters and making it easier for, little kids to find books where they can see themselves and they can imagine those possibilities. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, and congrats on getting the script sold. I can't wait to support and pick it up.
Thank you.
Of course. Bethany, what about you? Where can people follow you?
Well, I do not have the self-restraint that Miss Pink has, so you will find me on Twitter. You will see me in these Twitter streets. It is at BC Morrow for both Instagram and Twitter. I had to Instagram is where I'm like, I am just now figuring this out because publishers are like, please stop Instagramming pictures of your tweets. And I'm like, but I like words. So if you want to actually interact with me, it's probably best to find me on Twitter. I do also have a website, BethanyCMorrow.com.
Great. Okay, and Marlon, what about you? Where can people follow your work?
Yeah, you can definitely find me ConsciousCulturePublishing.com. That's where you can see all of my books, Alice in Wonderland Remixed, The Genius of Egypt, Uptown Dragon, as well as Makita, the Queen of Sheba. That's ConsciousCulturePublishing.com.
Awesome. And I am Jesse Bird. I've been your moderator for this panelist. I am children's book author, editor, art director, as well as the creative director for Black Santa. We are so happy that you all joined us today. This panel is called From Past to Present, Making History Inclusive in Children's Lit. And please remember that Afro Comic Con is a nonprofit and they are fueled by your support. So if you can, if you would like more content like this, if you would like to support more creators like this, this is a funnel to do that. So we really appreciate your time. Marlon, Michelle, Bethany, and Randy, thank you so much for sharing this wisdom and light today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Pleasure meeting everyone.
All right, you guys have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.